The void between stars erupted with activity as proximity alerts blared across the Galactic Assembly's detection grid. High Admiral Xerax of the monitoring fleet, his iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to alert red, studied the readings with growing confusion. After 3 centuries of commanding the Assembly's first contact protocols, he had never encountered anything quite like this. "Confirm these readings," he commanded, his auxiliary eyes focusing on the younger officers at their stations. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Confirmed, High Admiral," replied Lieutenant Koven, her tentacles weaving complex patterns of bewilderment. A single vessel approaches from the unexplored arm of the galaxy, approximately 400 meters in length. Basic fusion drive. No weapons arrays detected, though our scans cannot penetrate certain sections of their hull. The Assembly's first contact protocols were clear and had been established through millennia of experience. New species always approached with their most impressive fleet. The Varaxians had arrived with 1,000 warships, their plasma cannons charged in a display of martial pride. The Xin Collective had sent their entire scientific armada, 300 vessels bristling with sensors and experimental technology. Even the notoriously reclusive crystal mines had emerged from their nebula with dozens of their city ships. But this, one ship, alone, broadcasting its approach on open channels. "They're transmitting something," Koven announced. "Simple radio waves, text only." The message appeared on the command center's main display. "Greetings from Earth. We come to talk." Within hours, the Assembly's central chamber was in chaos. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the vast amphitheater, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of evolutionary paths. The mechanical consensus hummed with calculations. The energy beings flickered with agitation. The hive networks buzzed in confused harmony. Supreme Speaker Tolrin, her crystalline form refracting light, in patterns that commanded attention, called for order. "This is unprecedented," she declared, her voice resonating through both air and the psychic medium that many species utilized. "In all our recorded history, no species has approached the Assembly in such a manner." "It must be a trick," growled War Chief Kraz of the Varaxians, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming. "Perhaps they have cloaked vessels waiting to strike." No civilization achieves interstellar travel without building significant military forces. The Xin Collective's representative, a shimmering cloud of network nanites, formed into a speaking pattern. "Our preliminary analysis suggests their technology is remarkably efficient, if limited by current scientific understanding. The vessel's design prioritizes functionality over display." Most intriguing. As the debate raged, Xerax found himself drawn to the simple elegance of the human approach. While others saw weakness or deception, he began to wonder if they were all missing something profound. The humans had achieved faster than light travel, yet chose to come with a single ship. They had mastered fusion power, yet made no attempt to hide their technological limitations. They sought membership in the Assembly, yet seemed unconcerned with impressing anyone. "High Admiral," Koven interrupted his thoughts. "The human vessel is transmitting again." The new message was equally brief. "We understand your confusion. One ship is sufficient for conversation. We bring neither fleet nor force, for we believe true strength lies in the courage to come in peace." The chamber fell silent. The concept was so foreign, yet so obvious in hindsight. Every species in the Assembly had evolved through competition, through the need to display strength and capability. Their first contact protocols were built around this assumption. But these humans, they were operating under a completely different paradigm. Xerax rose from his command chair, his scales shifting to the deep purple of revelation. "Honored representatives," he began, "perhaps we are witnessing not a display of weakness, but a demonstration of profound strength. Consider, what greater confidence could a species show than to approach us exactly as they are, without pretense or display?" The energy beings pulsed in contemplation. The hive networks adjusted their consensus matrices. Even War Chief Kraz fell into thoughtful silence. "They are either the most foolish species we have encountered," Supreme Speaker Tolran observed, "or the wisest." Her crystalline form sparkled with something approaching admiration. "In either case, I believe we have no choice but to 100 species to question their most basic assumptions about strength, diplomacy, and first impressions. One ship, one simple message, and already they had taught the galaxy something new." The docking procedures at the Assembly's Grand Station were designed to accommodate fleets of vessels, grand armadas bearing the pride of their civilizations. Today, those massive bays stood empty save for a single ship, the Earth vessel Serenity. Its clean lines and understated design seemed to mock the ornate architecture surrounding it. Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped onto the station's diplomatic deck alone. No honor guard, no advisors, no display of military might. Just a woman in a simple blue uniform, carrying a small data tablet. The Assembly's welcoming committee, 50 representatives from the most prominent member species, watched in stunned silence as she approached. Supreme Speaker Tolran's crystalline form shifted through patterns of diplomatic greeting. "We welcome you, Ambassador Chen of Earth, though we admit to some confusion regarding your arrival protocols." "Thank you for your welcome, Supreme Speaker," Chen replied, her voice clear and confident. "I hope you'll forgive us for departing from traditional procedures. We believed it important to demonstrate our principles through actions rather than words." War Chief Kraz, who had insisted on attending despite protocol suggesting otherwise, could no longer contain himself. "And what principles would those be?" "That humanity is weak. That you lack the resources for proper diplomatic engagement." Chen smiled, an expression that many of the assembled species found simultaneously fascinating and unsettling. "Tell me, War Chief, if you encountered a being who stood before you unarmed while you bore weapons, which of you would be demonstrating true confidence?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Varaxian leader's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this perspective. "But surely," the Zen Collective's representative interjected, its nanite cloud forming complex patterns, "you must understand that the Assembly's protocols exist for practical reasons. How can we evaluate a species' potential contribution without seeing evidence of their capabilities?" "By listening," Chen replied simply. "By observing. By engaging with ideas rather than displays. We believe that true understanding comes not from what is shown, but from what is shared." As if to emphasize her point, she activated her data tablet. Instead of the expected technological demonstrations or military statistics, it displayed a simple series of images: Earth's varied ecosystems, its diverse population, its art and music and literature. Humanity has learned, often through bitter experience, that strength takes many forms. We've discovered that the ability to destroy is far less valuable than the ability to create, to adapt, to understand. We come to the Assembly not to prove our worth through force or technology, but to offer our perspective. The energy beings pulsed with increasing frequency, their usual patterns disrupted by this novel approach. The mechanical consensus hummed as it attempted to quantify the diplomatic implications. High Admiral Xerax, watching from his designated position, felt his scales shift to the deep green of profound interest. "You speak of perspective," Supreme Speaker Tolran observed, "yet you must be aware that the galaxy is not always a peaceful place. How does humanity propose to defend its interests among species that may not share your philosophical approach?" Chen's expression remained composed, but her eyes sparkled with something that made several species' threat assessment systems activate. "We are well aware of the galaxy's dangers, Supreme Speaker. But consider this. Throughout human history, our greatest achievements have come not from overwhelming force, but from understanding our opponents, adapting to challenges, and finding unexpected solutions. We believe these qualities are far more valuable to the Assembly than another fleet of warships." As she spoke, subtle changes began occurring throughout the diplomatic deck. Environmental controls adjusted automatically to optimize conditions for each species present. Translation matrices refined themselves to capture not just the words but the cultural context of each statement. Even the lighting shifted to accommodate the various visual preferences of the assembled representatives. The hive networks were the first to notice. The environmental systems, they're responding to an algorithm we've never encountered before. One that appears to be originating from your ship. Xerax finished, his scales now showing the purple of revelation. While we've been focused on what you haven't brought, we've failed to notice what you have. Your vessel's systems have been quietly interfacing with and improving our technology since the moment you arrived. Chen nodded. As I said, true strength often lies in what isn't immediately apparent. Humanity has chosen to focus our resources not on building fleets, but on understanding, adapting, and improving. One ship was sufficient because we came not to impress, but to connect. The assembly representatives began looking at the modest Earth vessel with new eyes. What else lay behind its simple exterior? What other capabilities had they overlooked in their focus on traditional displays of power? Perhaps, Supreme Speaker Tolran said slowly, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns of deep consideration. It is we who have failed the first contact protocols, not you. We allowed our preconceptions to blind us to new possibilities. On the contrary, Chen replied warmly, you've demonstrated exactly why humanity wishes to join the assembly. You've shown the capacity to question your assumptions, to adapt your thinking, to consider new perspectives. These are the qualities that will allow us to face the galaxy's challenges together. As the diplomatic reception continued, news spread throughout the station and beyond. The species that had arrived with one ship and no fleet had just delivered perhaps the most impressive demonstration of power the assembly had ever witnessed, and they had done it with words, wisdom, and understanding rather than force. The attack came without warning. One moment, the assembly's grand station was proceeding with its diplomatic functions. The next, massive vessels were emerging from quantum space at multiple points around the station. Their hulls bore no markings, their designs matched no known species, and their intentions became immediately clear as they opened fire on the station's outer defensive rings. In the central chamber, chaos erupted. The mechanical consensus blared warning frequencies. The energy beings flared with alarm. The hive networks scattered into defensive formations. Supreme Speaker Tolran's crystalline form pulsed with emergency patterns as she called for order. The defense fleet is responding, High Admiral Xerax reported, his scales now a sharp crimson of battle readiness. But they're scattered across 3 sectors. It will take at least 30 minutes for sufficient forces to arrive. War Chief Kraz's cybernetic enhancements whirred with battle calculations. The station's shields won't hold that long against focused fire of that magnitude. These attackers knew exactly when to strike, when our forces were deployed elsewhere. Ambassador Chen, who had been quietly observing from her diplomatic position, stood. If I may offer assistance. Several representatives turned to her, with expressions ranging from skepticism to desperate hope. The lone human ship, a mere diplomatic vessel, facing against what appeared to be a coordinated attack fleet. With respect, Ambassador, Kraz growled, this is hardly the time for philosophical discussions about the nature of power. On the contrary, Chen replied, her calm demeanor unchanged. This is exactly the time to demonstrate alternative approaches to conflict resolution. She activated her comm unit. Serenity, initiate protocol umbrella. The seemingly modest Earth vessel suddenly came alive with activity. Panels along its hull slid open, revealing not weapons, but a complex array of electromagnetic projectors. Within seconds, a cascade of energy began flowing from the ship, interfacing with the station's defensive systems in ways the assembly's engineers had never considered. What are they doing? The Zen Collective's representative demanded, its nanite cloud swirling in agitation. High Admiral Xerax's auxiliary eyes widened as he studied the tactical displays. They're reconfiguring our shield harmonics. The efficiency has increased by 300%. But how? "We've spent centuries studying defense rather than offense," Chen explained as her ship continued its work. "While other species focused on developing better weapons, we invested our resources in understanding how to protect ourselves and others. The Serenity isn't a warship. It's a systems optimization platform. The attacking vessels, having expected to face standard assembly defenses, found their weapons suddenly far less effective against the enhanced shields. But humanity's contribution didn't stop there. Serenity, initiate Protocol Lighthouse," Chen commanded. The Earth vessel began broadcasting on frequencies that seemed to slice through the quantum interference the attackers were using to mask their communications. Within moments, the assembly systems were flooded with data about the attacking fleet, their shield frequencies, engine configurations, and most importantly, their command and control patterns. "These vessels are automated," Chen announced, studying the data. "No life signs. They're being controlled remotely, likely from a significant distance. Standard tactics would focus on destroying them, but there's a more elegant solution." She turned to Supreme Speaker Toleran. "With your permission." The Supreme Speaker's crystalline form sparkled with decision patterns. "Granted." "Serenity, execute Protocol Labyrinth." The human vessel's next action demonstrated yet another unexpected capability. It began broadcasting a complex series of signals that appeared, to the assembly sensors, to be completely random. But the effect on the attacking fleet was immediate and dramatic. The automated vessels began to move erratically, their coordinated attack pattern dissolving into chaos. A viral logic bomb. The mechanical consensus hummed in revelation. They've infected the enemy's command protocols with contradictory instructions. Within minutes, the attacking fleet had ceased fire, their vessels drifting in confused circles. By the time the assembly's defense fleet arrived, the crisis was effectively over. War Chief Kraz approached Ambassador Chen, his cybernetic components whirring with what might have been respect. "You could have revealed these capabilities during your arrival. It would have immediately established humanity's technological prowess." Chen shook her head. "That would have defeated the purpose. We came to demonstrate that there are alternatives to displays of force, other ways to prove worth and earn respect. Today's events simply provided a practical example of our philosophy." As the assembly's engineering teams began studying the data from the incident, they discovered layer upon layer of innovation in the Serenity systems. The ship hadn't just helped defend against the attack, it had provided the assembly with new perspectives on technology, strategy, and the very nature of power. Supreme Speaker Toleran addressed the chamber once the situation had fully stabilized. "Today we witnessed not just the defense of our station, but the validation of a radical approach to galactic citizenship. Humanity, with one ship and without firing a single shot, has demonstrated more capability than many species do with entire fleets." The energy beings pulsed with agreement. The hive networks hummed in harmony. Even the mechanical consensus produced tones of approval. "Perhaps," Zirax observed, his scales shifting to the deep purple of wisdom, "we have finally encountered a species that can teach us not just new technologies or strategies, but new ways of thinking about the challenges we face." Ambassador Chen smiled. "That, High Admiral, has been our goal from the moment we decided to approach the assembly with a single ship. Sometimes, the most powerful statement is showing that you don't need to show power at all." In the days following the automated fleet's attack, the Grand Station buzzed with unprecedented activity. Species that had barely interacted for centuries now gathered in earnest discussion. The Serenity had become the most studied vessel in assembly space, though the humans continued to surprise everyone with their openness about their capabilities. Ambassador Chen stood before a mixed group of assembly engineers and scientists, patiently explaining the principles behind their defensive systems. The Zen Collective's nanite clouds swirled in complex patterns of fascination as they analyzed the data. "You mean to tell us," a mechanical consensus representative hummed, "that these shield harmonics were developed not for military purposes, but for atmospheric cleanup operations on Earth?" "Exactly," Chen confirmed. When we faced our climate crisis, we needed ways to contain and process atmospheric pollutants without harming the surrounding environment. The same principles that allowed us to create selective energy barriers for environmental restoration proved remarkably effective for defensive purposes. High Admiral Zirax, who had taken a personal interest in the proceedings, felt his scales shift to the blue-green of revelation. Your entire technological development followed this pattern, didn't it? Solving civilian problems first, then adapting those solutions for other purposes. It was necessity as much as philosophy, Chen explained. Earth has never united under a single government. We couldn't rely on overwhelming military force or massive industrial output. Instead, we had to become masters of efficiency, of finding elegant solutions that could work with limited resources. The Assembly's research teams had been particularly struck by the Serenity's adaptive systems. The ship's ability to interface with and enhance the station's defenses hadn't come from superior technology, but from an unprecedented capacity to understand and optimize existing systems. Your ship doesn't overpower problems, the Zin Collective observed, forming its nanites into a speaking pattern. It comprehends them. In the central chamber, Supreme Speaker Toleran convened a special session to discuss the implications of recent events. Representatives from all member species gathered, but the atmosphere was markedly different from the chaos of first contact. There was a new attention to detail, a willingness to listen that hadn't existed before. The attack we faced, Toleran began, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns of deep consideration, exposed not just vulnerabilities in our defenses, but in our thinking. We have long equated power with scale, strength with numbers, and capability with display. The humans have shown us the limitations of these assumptions. War Chief Kraz, whose initial skepticism of humanity had transformed into reluctant admiration, stepped forward. My people have always believed that the path to peace lies through strength of arms. Yet here we witnessed a greater victory, the complete neutralization of an enemy fleet without destruction, without loss of life, even without traditional weapons. The energy beings pulsed with agreement, their frequencies harmonizing in a way that indicated deep understanding. The hive networks, typically focused on consensus through numbers, had begun experimenting with smaller, more specialized problem-solving groups inspired by the human model. But perhaps most remarkably, Zirax added, his scales now showing the deep purple of wisdom, is how freely they share their insights. No demands for special privileges, no bargaining for political advantage. They simply solve problems because they can, and share solutions because they should. Ambassador Chen, who had been invited to observe the session, rose to address the chamber. What you're describing is fundamental to human nature. Our history is filled with examples of small groups, even individuals, changing the course of civilization not through force, but through ideas. We learned long ago that the most powerful force in the universe isn't energy or matter. It's understanding. She gestured to the various species assembled. Look at this chamber. Every form of life here evolved different solutions to the challenges of existence. Different biologies, different ways of thinking, different approaches to technology. We don't see these differences as obstacles to be overcome, but as resources to be understood and integrated. The mechanical consensus hummed in a new frequency, one that their records indicated had never been used before. You are suggesting that true advancement comes not from developing more powerful technologies, but from better understanding how to use what already exists. Exactly, Chen smiled. The Serenity isn't powerful because it has superior technology. It's effective because it can understand, adapt to, and enhance the systems around it. That's what humanity hopes to offer the Assembly, not just our own solutions, but our way of finding solutions. As the session continued, practical changes were already spreading throughout the station. Assembly engineers were revisiting old technologies with new perspectives. Species that had long relied on numerical superiority began exploring quality over quantity. The Voraxians, famous for their massive battle fleets, started discussions about converting some of their warships into research vessels. "We stand at a turning point," Supreme Speaker Tolran declared, her form sparkling with anticipation. For millennia, the Assembly has grown through the addition of new technologies, new resources, new military capabilities. But humanity has shown us that our next evolution may not come from adding more, but from understanding better. The chamber resounded with agreement, expressed in 100 different ways by 100 different species. The Assembly was beginning to grasp that humanity's greatest contribution wasn't any single technology or capability. It was a fundamentally different way of approaching the universe itself. High Admiral Xerax, watching the proceedings, reflected on how much had changed since that first moment when a single human ship appeared on their sensors. "They didn't need a fleet," he murmured, his scales showing the colors of understanding. "They brought something far more powerful. They brought perspective." 3 months after humanity's dramatic defense of the Grand Station, the Assembly gathered for a historic session. The massive central chamber had been redesigned, inspired by human principles of efficiency and inclusion. Gone were the hierarchical tiers that had previously separated species by military might or technological advancement. Instead, the space had been transformed into a collaborative environment where all representatives could interact as equals. Supreme Speaker Tolran's crystalline form captured and reflected the chamber's new lighting in a mesmerizing display as she opened the session. "We convene today not just to formally welcome humanity into the Assembly, but to acknowledge how profoundly their arrival has altered our understanding of civilization itself." The evidence of change was everywhere. The Varaxian battle fleets had begun converting their massive dreadnoughts into mobile research and diplomatic platforms, their weapons arrays replaced with laboratories and conference centers. The Zen Collective had revolutionized their approach to problem-solving, their nanite clouds now working in smaller, more adaptable groups. Even the traditionally rigid mechanical consensus had embraced flexibility, developing new protocols that valued innovative solutions over processing power. Ambassador Chen stood to address the chamber, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the ornate diplomatic garb of other species. "When we first arrived in Assembly space, many questioned our decision to come with a single ship. Today, I want to share the full reasoning behind that choice." The chamber fell silent, every species present focused intently on her words. Humanity's history is filled with moments where the smallest actions caused the greatest changes. A single book that transformed philosophy. A simple experiment that revolutionized science. One person's act of kindness that sparked social movements. We learned that true power lies not in the scale of your presence, but in the impact of your ideas. High Admiral Xerax, his scales now permanently showing new patterns that reflected his evolved understanding, nodded in agreement. "You chose to demonstrate this principle through your very arrival. One ship, carrying not weapons or threats, but possibilities." "Precisely," Chen smiled. "But what we never predicted was how quickly the Assembly would grasp and build upon these concepts. You've taken our principles of efficiency and adaptation and applied them in ways we never imagined." The energy beings pulsed with pride as their representative described new diplomatic protocols based on energy harmony rather than power projection. The Hive networks demonstrated how they had restructured their consensus-building process, achieving better results with smaller, more focused groups. Every species had found their own way to interpret and apply humanity's approach. Perhaps most significantly, Supreme Speaker Tolran observed, is how these changes have improved our response to challenges. The recent crisis in the Outer Rim would once have required a massive military deployment. Instead, a small team of mixed species, using optimized assembly technology, resolved the situation through targeted intervention and diplomatic innovation. War Chief Kraz, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, stepped forward. His cybernetic enhancements now included diplomatic and cultural analysis modules alongside tactical systems. "We feared that moving away from displays of force would make us vulnerable. Instead, it has made us stronger. Our potential enemies can no longer calculate our responses based on fleet sizes or weapons capabilities. They must now contend with the combined ingenuity of all our species working in harmony." The Assembly's statistical archives had recorded remarkable changes. Conflicts had decreased by 60%. Scientific breakthroughs had increased by a factor of 3. First contact protocols with new species had been completely redesigned, emphasizing understanding over intimidation. The galaxy was transforming, one idea at a time. Ambassador Chen activated a holographic display, showing the Serenity docked at the station. This ship arrived carrying Earth's hopes for a new kind of galactic community. Today, it stands as a symbol of what we can achieve when we value wisdom over warfare, understanding over uniformity, and cooperation over competition. And yet, the Zen Collective observed, its nanites forming intricate patterns of appreciation. You still surprise us. We assumed humans would eventually bring more ships once your position was secured. Instead, Chen finished, we've focused on sharing our knowledge, helping upgrade existing assembly vessels, and learning from your species in return. We don't need a fleet of our own when we can help improve the ships of all our allies. Supreme Speaker Tolran raised her crystalline form to its full height, creating a dazzling display of light that traditionally signaled moments of profound importance. The Assembly was founded on the principle that together, we are stronger than apart. But humanity has taught us that true strength comes not from combining our powers, but from synthesizing our perspectives. The chamber resonated with agreement expressed in hundreds of different ways by hundreds of different species. The mechanical consensus hummed in newly developed harmonies. The energy beings pulsed in synchronized patterns. The hive networks moved in elegant coordinated displays. As we welcome humanity as full members, Tolran continued, we also embrace a new era for the Assembly. One where our influence flows not from the size of our fleets or the strength of our weapons, but from the power of our ideas and the depth of our understanding. High Admiral Xerax, looking out at the transformed chamber, felt his scales shift to a color that had no name in his species' language, a new pattern for a new age. They came in one ship, he mused, and changed the course of galactic history not through force of arms, but through force of example. As the session concluded, the Serenity remained at its dock, its simple presence a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can catalyze the greatest changes. Humanity had arrived seeking to join the galactic community. Instead, they had helped forge it into something entirely new, a civilization where true power lay not in the ability to dominate, but in the wisdom to understand, the courage to adapt, and the strength to embrace change.